The story starts off with our main character opening his eyes in a strange land he's never seen before. He looks around and spots a few odd-looking books stacked near a wooden chair. When he peeks outside, he sees glowing mushrooms and huge trees that look like they came from a fairy tale. Out of curiosity, he tries moving his hand, and out pops a spark of lightning, surprising him completely. Not a bad way to kick things off. Then it flashes back to just before he arrived here. He'd ended up in a quiet place that felt like some kind of endless morning fog. A mysterious figure appeared and explained he died in an accident. But instead of staying stuck there, he was given a chance to be reborn somewhere else. There were no rules or big missions. He was free to live however he liked. He asked for a peaceful life, so they sent him to a huge forest called Mistwood Hollow, filled with magical creatures and hidden secrets. He woke up in a small stone house, stocked with enough dried food to last a while and surrounded by a protective barrier that kept monsters out. While unpacking, he opened a chest and found jars full of pickled vegetables and some strips of dried meat. Alongside them were 2 books, one about the plants and animals in the area, and the other teaching beginner spells. Even though the language looked unfamiliar, he could read it easily. Curious to test his abilities, he tried sparking lightning again, and discovered he didn't have to chant anything, he just had to picture it clearly. When he wanted to boil some water, he first tried striking rocks together to make a spark, but nothing happened. A bit frustrated, he decided to use the little lightning bolt he'd summoned before to light a bundle of dry moss. Watching the flame catch felt like a tiny victory. Later, he wondered if he could just make hot water appear right in his pot without needing a fire. It turned out magic was a lot handier than he'd thought. The next morning, he tasted the preserved food and realized he'd have to start looking for fresh ingredients soon. But leaving the safety of the barrier meant he could run into all sorts of creatures, and all he had was a short axe. Determined not to get caught off guard, he began practicing combat spells. His first attempt was a small spark meant to burn a patch of grass, but it barely singed it. Then he tried to create a gust of wind to push a log, but it only stirred up a little dust. He reminded himself that focus was the most important part. With his eyes closed, he pictured exactly how the magic should look and feel. After practicing again and again, things got better. He learned how to heat water in his hands, make a ball of light hover over his head, and tried out a spell he called Thunder Snap, though it still needed more work to be useful. Later, he decided to craft himself a weapon. He found a strong branch, attached the axe blade to the end, and sealed it in place with sticky resin hardened by magic. Feeling a bit more confident, he stepped beyond the barrier and started exploring. While searching along a hillside, he picked up some smooth stones perfect for making sparks. As he dug around for edible roots, a small creature with a spiky back came sprinting out of a bush and charged at him. For a moment, he completely froze, remembering how helpless he'd felt in his old life. But then he jumped aside, and the creature skidded past. He focused his energy and sent a quick jolt of electricity into the ground, which startled the animal long enough for him to stab it with his makeshift spear. His hands were still trembling afterward. Back inside the little house, he sat down to catch his breath. Even small monsters were serious threats here. But he also realized that having magic meant he finally had a way to protect himself. Even the smallest monsters he came across were a serious hassle, and he started to wonder how he'd ever deal with something truly terrifying. One day, while flipping through that old guide again, he noticed a few pages at the very back labeled as secret notes. One part described huge creatures called stone colossi, towering beings that could crush villages under their feet. If you happened to spot one, the only advice was to escape as fast as you could. Another section mentioned a weird thing known as a pale revenant. Nobody seemed to know what it really was or where it came from. The book only warned that if it ever appeared, it was probably the end. Not long after reading that, Rio was out in the woods again when a massive shadow swept over the treetops. He looked up just in time to see a huge bat dropping straight toward him. His chest tightened as he raised a shield spell and tried to duck behind a fallen log. This thing wasn't just big. It could spit clouds of poison and had wings that made the air shudder. Realizing hiding wouldn't save him forever, he steadied himself. He fired streaks of fire, but the bat dodged everything and swooped closer. At the last second, Rio made a thick shell of hardened earth around his body. The bat smashed against it and flew away, one wing dragging. Shaken, he realized he'd wandered too far and had no clue where his shelter was anymore. While searching for any sign of the path back, he ended up near a stretch of cliffs and spotted something that made him feel cold all over. A tall shape in ragged robes sitting on a creature with skeletal legs. As weeks passed, Rio slowly got better at facing the bizarre monsters in this place. He fought a giant centipede with armor like stone and learned to cut clean through thick branches using a sharper lightning strike. All the practice made him more sure of himself. At some point, he knew he'd have to go back to find that cloaked figure again. Since the old guide never described anything like it, he had no clue if it was a regular creature or something way beyond that. They fought in a clearing, surrounded by thorn bushes. The figure smashed his barrier apart like it was nothing, and knocked him onto the ground. But instead of finishing the fight, it left behind a strange blade made of black metal, humming with power, almost like it expected him to take it. Later, when Rio was out picking mushrooms, he noticed the same giant bat flying above, but now it was even larger, and its skin sparked with pale blue currents. It swooped down so fast he barely had time to react. He stacked barrier after barrier in front of him, but the bat tore through them without slowing down. He tried his most powerful fire spell, but it slipped aside effortlessly. Then the creature unleashed a blast of cold wind that shattered the last shield and sent him rolling. As shards flew everywhere, it rained down streaks of poison mist and dove again. Out of options, Rio grabbed the black sword and rushed forward. With all the strength he had left, he jumped high and brought the blade down hard, striking deep into the bat. It slammed to the ground and finally stopped moving. Breath coming fast, he realized the creature had probably evolved just to get revenge. As shaken as he was, he knew the battle had made him stronger. Before he could even think about catching his breath, a massive dragon with scales like obsidian landed in front of him. His thoughts froze as he remembered what the book said about dragons, but instead of attacking, he felt a voice echoing quietly inside his mind. The dragon shared that it hadn't tried this mind speech in ages and was surprised it still worked. It seemed curious about the bat and wondered if Rio had been the one to bring it down. When it noticed the black sword in his hand, it recognized it as a weapon once carried by an old protector of the realm. That meant someone important believed he was worth watching. They stood there a long while, trading stories as the sky grew darker. As night fell, the dragon shared its name, Varion, and promised they'd meet again before lifting off and disappearing into the clouds. Rio just stood there, trying to make sense of everything. He never thought he'd end up having a calm talk with a dragon. This world was so full of surprises, it felt like anything was possible. Far away, the being who had sent Rio here was looking over his progress. While going through the records, he noticed something strange, a hidden ability no one else in this age carried. The last time it had appeared was thousands of years ago in another traveler. Rio's hidden trait? He would never age. That's where this episode wraps up.